I'm very honored that I'm part of this wonderful and very important conference. In this part of conference, we will discuss on the topic how to involve volunteers in heritage preservation. At the beginning, I was thinking how to do like introduction in this this roundtable, but when I saw background and website from Juraj Požgaj, just a volunteer center Zagreb, is that right? Yes. I saw one quote from one of your students. Her name is Antonella B. She was participating on one of your training. And she said, I started volunteering when I realized that I can change the world starting from myself. The only future we change is the one we create ourselves. And I have decided to create my own and the future of others in the best possible way. I think that is the very nice introduction, like what is volunteerism, and how this is important for every part of, to contribute to community in a way. So at the beginning, I would like to every one of us say something about their background, then we will share experience. So maybe Juraj, you can start to say something about your background and who are you and what are you doing?
Thank you, Jovana, for this great introduction and for using a quote of one of our great and wonderful volunteers for an opening statement for this discussion. I'm also very happy to find myself here with you in this conference, and I hope that I can give a valid contribution for everyone involved. I'm a coordinator of the info office of the Volunteer Center Zagreb. That means that this is a part of our activity that helps inform and counsel both volunteers and organizations who include volunteers in their work on mostly a legal framework on how to involve volunteers, but also on some practical things like how to find volunteer engagement suitable for me and how to help those people and how to volunteer in those areas that I find attractive and suitable for my own preferences. But Volunteer Center Zagreb also works in different areas. We also coordinate and operate an online platform that mostly whose goal is to connect volunteers and organizations. This is a platform that works kind of like a website in which you can find a job suitable for yourself. So we have organizations who post their volunteer activities and volunteers who can look at them and apply for one that is suitable for them. And for a start, I invite everyone included in this discussion to check our website and see what volunteer activities are now available in Zagreb and how you can volunteer. But we also work in different areas to include different stakeholders who are relevant for the subject of volunteering. For example, we work with schools on the subject of school volunteering, where we try to include students in volunteering. Then we also work with companies in the field of volunteering for employees, where we help companies facilitate volunteering for their employees and help them connect with nonprofit organizations and include employees in their volunteer actions and programs. But now to get to the point that is relevant for this discussion, we also work on the subject of crisis volunteering that is now really relevant and that has opened a few new trends in the subject of volunteering, and we can get to that if our discussion leads to that point. And I'll stop now and give the word to other participants.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to hear later about your experience in crisis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I invite Svetlana Jović. She's United Nations Intern Force in Lebanon. So please, if you could introduce yourself. Thank you so much that you are here, Tas.
Dear Jovana, thank you for introduction, and thank you to organizers for inviting me to this conference. It's really impressive number of experts and people in different fields. I'm not expert in volunteering, but actually I started my career as a volunteer, so I can only talk from my personal experience. I graduated law. I'm a lawyer by profession, and then the war broke out in Croatia in '91. And I volunteered for European community monitors who arrived to monitor cessation of hostilities, and they needed language assistance. So there was hundreds of our students, graduates, unemployed lawyers like me who joined, and we were providing services. We felt that this is the best contribution, you know, to during the war, that we give our skills which we were really good at. And this somehow turned into another volunteering when the genocide in Rwanda happened. And then I volunteered. I went as a human rights monitor and stayed there for 5 months to monitor and report on the genocide. And actually then my career somehow turned into United Nations, and I became a civil servant. And from that time, we have implemented many programs when we were recruiting young people and volunteers in order to, countries affected by conflict or post-conflict countries, where we were actually using enthusiastic young people to bring peace and negotiate peace. And one of these projects was actually in Pakrac, on a ceasefire line during the war in '93, when there was 20 volunteers from Croatia, Austria, Europe, all around the Europe deployed, and actually they started the project of reconciliation. So yeah, that's my experience with volunteering.
Very impressive.
My personal.
Thank you so much. Very
You're
impressive.
welcome. You're welcome.
Now I invite Bert, is it right? Bert Ludwig, from European Heritage Volunteers from Germany. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to be here. Just first some words about my own professional background. I'm by education architect, studied architecture and heritage conservation in Germany and Czech Republic, and had been working first in heritage administrations on various levels, local, regional, federal level, and later changed to the NGO, to the non-profit sector, and having been working in the field of heritage education, civil society engagement for heritage and linked fields on in the German level first and later on the European level. But I'm here not in position as myself, but in my role as Director of European Heritage Volunteers. European Heritage Volunteers is doing this, what the name describes, volunteering for heritage all over Europe. Europe in a wider definition, in the definition in accordance to the Council of Europe, that means the wider European cultural space, and not only European Union, and even more than half of the projects which we are carrying out are taking place outside European Union, because often there the need is even bigger than in the traditional European Union countries. The target groups are students of heritage-related fields, are young heritage professionals, and our heritage activists, heritage enthusiasts, coming from Europe and beyond. Over the years, we had been seeing participants from 67, 68 countries worldwide, but 75% of the participants are originated from Europe. We have two project lines. One are the Heritage Volunteers projects, and the others are the Heritage Training courses. The training courses have a little bit a stronger educational aspect. Meanwhile, the volunteering projects are more contributing to solve a particular problem. And they are concentrating on different topics as traditional handicraft. I could just follow the last presentation of the woman before the break, very interesting, also dealing with traditional handicrafts, as also other topics as conservation restoration, as documentation, and various tasks related to the rescue and the conservation of heritage. In total, the program combines every year between 30 and 40 projects and training courses. This year we have currently planned to 28, which is a little bit less due to the Corona restrictions, but nevertheless, even last year we could implement more than 60% of the original planned program. And all the program sees yearly participation of around 400, mostly young heritage volunteers. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. And now I invite Žana Mata, Matulić-Bilač. She is from International Institute for Conservation of Historic and Artworks from Croatia. Žana, could you?
I really wish to welcome and to say hello to Juraj, especially because we had last year we had a few meetings and it was very important for me, that experience. I just have to say I've been working for 30 years now in conservation and restoration in Croatia. So most of that period in a state office in conservation department, Minister of Culture for 17 years, and then now 13 years in the Croatian Conservation Institute. So I can say I'm not a volunteer, but I feel like that. I can say all those 30 years I feel like volunteer because it's an approach. It's most of my work I feel is I shouldn't do it, but I want it. And even not officially, the first 2 years of my work was I was a volunteer. And the day they gave me a job, I was very unhappy, unhappy because till then I was feeling I'm doing something great, you know. And when they started to pay you, you feel like you have to do something. But now, when we started to function as a let's say, we had a new mandate of the group of the IC, Croatian Group of International Institute, that I had it from March last year. Then we wasn't thinking about volunteers at all. We were just thinking about how we can use our energy to do some things. And then there was a call from a Minister of Culture. They needed experts for their teams because they started to document damage around Zagreb. And it was not easy to find such people because they were occupied with different things and there are not so many restorers and conservators in Croatia. So I was just looking on the internet, and then I have found this volunteer center of Zagreb. And that very, I mean, it's fantastic opportunity that you can do it very easily. You can just propose what you're imagining to do. And then that letter came to Juraj and his team. It's a team of really enthusiastic young people. They responded immediately. Wow. And then we started to talk how those kind of things are possible to organize in Zagreb. There are lots of problems they came out from that situation because the situation of safety and you know this it is normally like that, but the situation where when you are sending somewhere some people that they introduce themselves as an experts, then you have to prove that. So we were like a filter of those applies from the different people. And we decided to open the possibility of receiving, let's say, the application from the people who are not normally their everyday life conservators and restorers. And they're not, they don't have their jobs in the conservation department and the Minister of Culture, but we needed them. One of them was Juraj Požgaj. He had a lecture half an hour ago, I think. And he said he is a seismologist also as a conservator. He started to think how to connect people from the different professions, that we can cooperate on some problems that we find in Zagreb. And so we get some chemists, also geologists, conservators, and different kind of. And then we started to function. I don't know how, and I'll have my lecture tomorrow about their topic. But,
maybe we can discuss about that later. That is very interesting topic. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, we should discuss about that. I just wanted to say that it's great that we found that now it is possible. So then we can find some other ways of functioning. Sorry, did you want to know something about me more? I'm also a professor on the University of Split for 20 years. So I work with the students. And in this occasion, we have been working with the students on this project. Is it too much for introduction?
No, it is perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jovana.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Since Robert Montoya, he's not here yet, I will introduce myself. I am Jovana Mijatović. I came from Belgrade, Serbia, and I have my own organization. It's a small organization, but it's important because I found it a couple years ago. It's called Kulturnaut, Center for Creative Children and Youth. And the idea how I found this organization, a couple years ago, I finished course, ICROM course, first aid to cultural heritage in time of crisis. And later, later in that time, I got a project that I collaborate with Urban Development Center from Serbia and Cultural Heritage Without Borders from Albania. And we have a very nice project, Balkan Care. It's like Balkan Cultural Aid Response for Emergency. And that in that project, we had one training for volunteers from Balkan, from Greece, Macedonia, Kosovo, Albania, Serbia, Montenegro. And that's it. After that, I didn't continue to work with volunteers, but I more focus on children. And that is like why I organized that organization, because I would like to teach more children about how to protect cultural heritage in the future. And my mission is, if I get through to only one child, that I success for the future. That is like my mission. And that is how, and all my workshop or some other projects are related to protect cultural heritage. So it is like I applied. Sometimes it's very interesting because I make them like some theater, I don't know how, it's like something like that, like put them a lot of good things, like make fun, but in that same they are learning. So that is interesting. So that is for me now, and maybe now we can share our experience. So Juraj, you can continue what you want to say. I'm very interested how you involved. I suppose you have you involved your volunteers during the earthquake in Croatia. Is it right? Did I understand correctly?
That is correct. Well, yeah. The volunteer centers are a specific kind of organizations. Although one would think that we primarily organize volunteers and provide volunteer help, we actually only provide a background for nonprofit organizations to do those things themselves. So we are an organization that helps others to do their volunteer work and include their volunteers in a way that is good and that is in line with the legal framework. But we also, well, we are a non-profitable organization ourselves, we also have the right to organize volunteers ourselves and to organize and do our own volunteer actions and volunteer programs in which we help the people in need. And we do this in a greater amount in times of crisis. So yeah, we did that during the epidemic and during the earthquake in Croatia, which was a specific period of time. It was a really confusing time because, well, 12 months ago, we had a pandemic and we had a lockdown in Croatia, and we were told that we should stay at home, and well, society as we know it stopped for a while. And then the earthquake hit Zagreb in March, and we found ourselves, I think the whole NGO sector found itself in a very confusing time because we were told to stay at home, but also the needs of people who were victims of the earthquake and the pandemic have increased, and actually we had an increased need for activities of volunteers. So we had an emergence of new trends in this period. I think that non-profitable organizations needed some time to adjust and to well, to get all the information they needed to really organize volunteer activities and to get back in their offices, because at that time they didn't really know if there is going to be some financial consequences or some other kinds of backlash if they would get to their offices right after the earthquake and do their humanitarian and social services that they normally provide for people in need. So what happened then is an emergence of civic initiatives, of citizens who got together and formed their own networks of volunteers that had really good infrastructure that addressed the need of the victims in a really good way. They were fast and they were effective. And I think this is the ongoing trend now in Croatia, informal volunteering. Maybe it is short-term volunteering of small groups of people, but there are also large civic initiatives like in Croatian Jedni za druge. I think it's in English, it would be something like for each other.
Each other.
Yeah, yeah. Who provided help for people who couldn't leave their homes during the pandemic. So they delivered different kinds of necessities that they needed at the time. But we also have a really nice example of the, in Croatian, it is Alpinisti Visinci Speleolozi. Those are different groups of people who have experience in working on high grounds or climbing or working on rooftops. So, and they had the tools. So they got together and helped Zagreb after the earthquake to rebuild the roofs and also remove potential hazards for people after the earthquake. But I will also like to reflect on the work of the International Institute for Conservation, who are an example that also the nonprofit organizations did a really good job in including volunteers in their work. And this is a great example for including expert volunteers. And only nonprofit organizations have the resources to do that. And they did that in time. And I think this is great material for future reflection and in making future guidance for potential new periods of crisis. And I think I'll stop here. And
yeah, no, just I want to ask, you had two earthquakes, as I remember, like in March or April, something like that, and later, recently in September, October.
Yes. Recently, we had a big earthquake in Petrinja in the Sisačko-Moslavačka županija, cities of Sisak and Petrinja in the end of December, but it was really a series of earthquakes, not only the big one in the beginning, but also a wave of lesser ones afterwards that also brought always new hazards for passerbys.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Now I invite Svjetlana. She has very also interesting experience about explosion in Beirut. I think 2019, is it right?
Yes, last year.
Yeah, last year.
It was last year, 2020.
Last year, yes, 20. That before COVID, yes?
During the COVID.
During the COVID.
During the COVID. Yes, everything happened. The whole world was shaking, I think, during the COVID. Beirut explosion was a different experience. And in the absence of a strong state and state authorities, unlike what Juraj was saying, here mostly you had someone to take a lead when earthquake happened. When Beirut blast, as we call it, happened on 4th of August, unfortunately, it shook the city and 8,000 buildings were damaged, out of which 640 historical buildings, and some of them, around 60, I think, were under the threat of collapse. In that context, first who actually reacted the very next day were UNESCO office in Beirut, Blue Shield National Committee from Lebanon, and supported by Blue Shield International. And there were those who immediately agreed to launch a rapid assessment of damaged historic houses and museums, libraries, and to see what kind of damage is done to the heritage. And this was purely a civil society-led initiative. Of course, UNESCO is the lead in that aspects, but Blue Shield International was, and Lebanon National Committee were who actually carried out the whole Blue Shield emergency response, as it was called, the whole project, and have collected donations. And the only way to actually do a rapid assessment was through the volunteers, because at the time the town was so shocked, people were so angry, so stressed and destroyed by the fact that, you know, it was not a natural disaster, it was not a war, it was this time something completely different. It was a negligence from a side of let's say, state authorities that has destroyed the city. 1/3 or more, even more of the city was destroyed. So the emergency response led by Blue Shield had engaged with universities, starting with, of course, University of Archaeologists, architects, professors, students, and a speed reaction, actually, a swift mobilization of volunteers happened actually thanks to COVID. And this is now a paradox, you know. During the COVID time, all these new platforms have been developed. You know, COVID started, February, March, and then the first lockdown started, and then the WhatsApp groups and Instagram and all these platforms became the only way of communication, especially for youth. And by August, you know, I think almost everyone in Lebanon was skillful. Lebanon is the size of Croatia, so it's very small state. Everyone was skillful in this communication and mobilizing youth on a platform to come and join in helping clearing the city from the rebel on one side, and helping Blue Shield International emergency response was really easy. In that context, Blue Shield created an online application for the damage assessment of historical houses with a very simple template that allowed actually volunteers who joined in rapid assessment to go online directly from the house. They had either mobile devices, iPads, telephones, computers, all depends. And they were actually able right there to fill in and take photos and fill all the technical details of the damaged house. And that was an incredible way of launching a rapid assessment, I think. I'm not aware, I'm not the expert on the cultural heritage and emergency response preparedness, but this was, I think, the first time that this kind of platform was used for the rapid assessment. And of course, thanks to cooperation with the Ministry of Culture, who realized that they themselves cannot facilitate more than actually provide additional volunteers, architects who joined this youth, who were, first of all, not all maybe architects or engineers or archaeologists to understand what they're assessing. So each field team of volunteers who have a mobile applications to fill the damage, the information of that damage, there was always an architect from the Ministry of Culture, Directorate General for Antiquities with them to guide them on how to assess and, you know, which are the most important aspects and how to record the damage. So yeah, it was a very interesting experience. And it was wonderful to watch these young people who were not, we always talk about how you have to train volunteers, you have to do this, they have to know, etc. But it was wonderful to watch the spirit of these young people. And there was always, you know, they were so well organized, so they would call each other. So if one team would miss an architect or archaeologist, they would just, again, on their devices, call and bring what was needed. They would organize online. You would just get a message, leave the rubble and what's for throw out in front of the house. Somebody will come and collect. So it was very spontaneous, civil society managed under the chapeau of a Blue Shield International, who was able to pull all the experts on board and who was able to mobilize, of course, donors community, which was very important, because to start with, you had to provide them with internet, with transport, with, you know, all devices in order to do the assessment. So in what explosion happened on 4th of August, and I think in October, we were already in the field, you know, on the other side. The response team were outside on the field protecting the building, because by that time, the information of a structure and which houses and which structures are in danger of on the risk of collapse. New teams, this time professional teams of Lebanese armed forces, engineers, United Nations peacekeepers were sent to secure the building from collapse. We are all talking about the heritage that is Beirut is rich with architecture and buildings and churches. And yeah, it was a lot of work to be done, but it was wonderful to see this spontaneous movement of people clearing the city, as I said, in the absence of the state authority to do anything.
Thank you. It is interesting how this online technique like rise up during the COVID situation, and how maybe if before that happened,
I'm sure that it would be a chaos and it would be a mess. Absolutely. I don't think the town would be, I mean, most building would probably collapse by the time that teams would come to do the assessment. And I think that the whole cleaning and everything would just not, I mean, I'm sure that volunteers would be on the street, but coordination, cooperation, exchange of information in real time, you know, where you could talk and discuss and make decisions right there on the spot with all this new technology is fascinating. So I think one thing what we have to really thank for COVID time is that brought us a different dimension, and for emergency preparedness, I think this should be a future tool for any emergency response planning.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Thank you. Now I invite Bert so he can share his own experience about training and
listening to all these first aid experiences, we are a little bit beside, which is given by our structure, because if you want to combine in a group of volunteers, optimally 15 participants from 15 different countries of origin, of 7, 8, 9, 10 different heritage-related backgrounds, it needs a certain pre-planning, and you are not so able to react quickly. Nevertheless, if there would come the request for first aid, we could also join these structures, but it's not our everyday work. Nevertheless, European Heritage Volunteers is contributing to the rescue of heritage with the volunteers, and also more in a preventive manner. And I tried, while listening to the other speakers, I tried to order it a little bit in this way. On one hand, I want to underline the engagement to prevent loss by disasters. Being based in Weimar, we had the big fire in 2004 when Anna Amalia Library burned down with a lot of documents which got lost. And maybe even given by this experience, we have one project line which is dedicated to the digitalization of written sources to prevent their potential loss in case of fire or other unexpected issues. Another one, we have projects which are prevent buildings to collapse. Not collapse as after an earthquake, as you mentioned, but for example, we had a project in Albania last year, a church from 14th century, by the way, originally Serbian founded, and it was improper saved, rescued in the 70s. You may imagine in the 70s in Albania, they had other tasks than to serve a church. And it was, the roof construction was pressuring directly on the walls, including already cracks which had been happened. So we undertook the conservation interventions in order to prevent the loss of the church. Then the quite average approach is avoid influences of degradation. A good example is our line of projects we have in northern Russia, where we are working on wooden architecture, which is exposed to the climatic influences, and so it has a certain lifetime and it needs permanent interventions. We are working there on wooden churches, but not only churches, also wooden houses. By the way, in the same moment, also trying to connect or to transmit the knowledge of the local carpenters towards the younger generation. This was the natural degradation. Sometimes you have even artificial degradation. I remember one project in Bulgaria 2 years ago, an archaeological excavation of a Roman basilica, which had been excavated, but when excavating, nobody had thought about conservation measures. And being located in an area where it is minus degrees in winter, it's clear. The fines would not have overcome the next 5-10 years. And so we started with conservation measures to avoid the result of these, how I say, artificial degradation. Then you have influences of criminals. We had, for example, in Albania, a project where we were working on a settlement of the 4th century, which had been robbed by criminals. They opened the graves in order to find valuable things, kept coming with buggers, with big machinery. And so we undertook consolidation measures, because if you open bricks from Roman times, which have been conserved over centuries after the under the earth, and then you open it, they are exposed to the climatic influences. Then we have projects which are preventing, I would say, everyday criminality. A very interesting project in Portugal, you may know azulejos, those ceramic tiles which are on the facades. What people mostly do not know, that those ceramics which they can buy on the souvenir markets are stolen from facades of the other part of the city. And there we had been part of a structure, even initiated by the criminal police, very nice, also with working with electronic devices, because it was a combination, documentation of the facades, and the population had been invited to inform the police about potential losses, so that they later could identify the stolen ceramics on the touristic markets. But to do so, you need before a documentation of the existing azulejos. Then the very common thing, to prevent ignorance and neglection. There's a lot of even in Germany, we have projects. We just worked last year on a mausoleum hidden in the forest. Nobody took care, but it's from 1837. That means 180 years old, collapsed roof, nearly collapsed walls, and so on. Sometimes it's also about neglection of a whole component, a whole aspect, a whole category, let's say category of heritage, technical heritage, for example. We had 2 years ago, back to Croatia, as we are now in Croatia, a project in Ivanić Grad, where we were contributing to the documentation of technical heritage, in the same moment contributing to the revalorization of this aspect of heritage among the local community. Coming to the end, 3 other components. It's also about trying to prevent the loss of traditional use. We will have this year a project on a water mill on an island in front of the coast of Finland, which is still had been in the state of the 1930s, because it had been handled by an elderly man, which died 4 years ago. And now is the risk of loss of the water mill, a very mini water mill, but at the same moment of this traditional still working style, because nobody would today use a water mill to make grain on an efficiency rate of the 30s. The water mill itself dates back to the 18th century, by the way. Sometimes also very important thing is the loss of movable heritage. Because if churches are abandoned or houses are abandoned, movable heritage is the first what has been stolen. Just as a link to the professor which is from Western Ukraine, which spoke, we have a project every year in Western Ukraine restoring wooden tabernacles, which are, you know, these things where the religious parts are kept, these wooden boxes on the altar, which have been collected from damaged churches into a museum, but they are standing there in the basement, nobody takes care. And so the restoration is the first step to, after the restoration, they were shown in the exhibition to bring them back to the public awareness. And as the last point, tangible heritage is very strongly linked with intangible heritage. We have, for example, every year project in Romania, where we are restoring with volunteers folkloric clothes. But it's not only about the clothes themselves and the museum collections, but also in first line about the knowledge of the intangible techniques of the intangible heritage, which is the base for those clothes. Yeah, this was a short overview. It's not so drastic as earthquake, as explosion, but it's on the other hand, the preventive engagement in order to avoid loss of various categories of heritage.
Yeah, but especially like looting is also like one of dangerous things. So I would like to work with you, you know, to go with you everywhere around to prevent something. Thank you so much, Bert. Thank you. Žana, would you like to continue what you said like before at the beginning, how you connected during the earthquake, if you want to share that experience?
Yes. So now after maybe 20 minutes of listening of your great experiences on the place where the things and the crisis really happened, I have a sad news. I mean, I have to say that I'm almost 400 kilometers from Zagreb. I live there. So I'm not in Zagreb. I serve here as an organizer and a coordinator in this situation. So my idea was to start to be that ISC became an organizer of the volunteer project. So Juraj told me everything what I have to do, but it was not possible to work almost any of those actions which were necessary to do in Zagreb in early start of and in the few months after the earthquake, because the institutions made the teams, Ministry of Culture, Croatian Conservation Institute, and they were documenting, they were documenting the facades, the architectural problems, and the movable heritage and all those things. So it was really frustrating. I opened 50 places for volunteers. And very soon, in maybe 10 days, we had 50. And they started to write me letters. What shall I do? And how can I know? I'm in Split. So we started to make some kind of a net of our colleagues in Zagreb, because half of our members of IC Croatian group are from Zagreb and they live in Zagreb. So I tried to direct them to my colleagues. But also, it was not possible for volunteers to come into the museums or to become a part of the teams, because the whole society, let's say, are not very open to on those kinds of cooperations. So the whole situation was really frustrating. So I started to organize some kind of work from home from the volunteers. They were starting to filling the base, which was a platform called Obnovi Zagreb, which established the Croatian Association of Architects. We believe it is very important. Now we had maybe 900 of contributions, and in the future we believe it will serve as knowledge for the future restorations. And only one little part of that was on the streets and in the museum. Maybe I can send one interesting and important action was in Glyptoteka of Zagreb. Our colleagues, and they did some documenting of the state of the movable heritage, serving the Ministry of Culture. That was all. So I was really frustrated, and I told Dragica, who was one of the organizers here, when we started to think about the conference, that we have to call Mr. Bert to help us, and we have to make this roundtable discussion. But I can say only a few basic things. I'm really frustrating now. I don't know. What can I do in the future? We stopped our first project with 1,700 hours of volunteer working hours. There were 50 of volunteers, and they did a job. They did a great job, but I'm not sure how important it was. There were enormous damages in Zagreb, but most of them are now in the hands of institutions who takes care of our heritage. Part of our colleague started to walk around the streets of Zagreb. Some of them were art historians, architects, different kind of professions, and they started to document the facade. But where to start? So they chose one of them to make like a pilot project. So they did really good job now. That study is on our website. I don't know, everything grew with an intuitive level, on the intuitive level. Now we are counting. We finished that first project, which from the last year, and we opened a new one because of Banovina and Petrinja. And now situation is a bit different because I opened only 15 of the volunteer places, and Dragica Krstic with Tamara. You know Tamara, she's
here,
well known well known to all of us, and their colleague, because the teachers faculty in Petrinja called them and asked them to help in evacuation of the library of the teachers faculty. So now it's the biggest action we have. So everything is in the hands of Dragica. I was just here to try to organize the nation, a call for the nation, and organizing the nation from here. And I don't know what else to do. Help me. I don't know, do you have any ideas? So we are just, ISC Creation Group, we are just an organizer of the volunteer project on the platform of Volunteer Center of Zagreb. And we are really limited. It would be great that lots of our colleagues and students and different people wanted to volunteer in the heritage care, to connect with the European heritage volunteers and to try to I don't know, maybe it would be better to organize, Bert, to help us to organize something like that here. It would be much better. I mean, there were enormous work which is in front of us. And most of the work which was physical part of the job has been already done from the fires. Unfortunately, enormous amount of material fell from the facades is now on the garbage. My idea was to send our volunteer there to try to document the parts. They're almost everywhere. In one moment, the institution decided to find a place where to put them, to make like depot. But it's still, I don't feel it's possible to organize a really effective volunteer activity, which would be in Zagreb, because there are lots of institutions there. In the museums, they're very well organized, really. The museums had their restorers, conservators, they are working, but because of the pandemic, they can't receive any volunteers inside. It's also very complicated. So I don't know, maybe something new will go out from the situation.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, like, you got message from Dragica Krstić. She said, like, dear Žana, I count on your engagement in the future as well. So I think,
I called my, I work in the Croatian Conservation Institute. There are teams of my colleagues that are working every day. I also said I will come if you need me. So, but maybe now this is more important, I have to say, because from this far distance, I can see some things which the people who are constantly feeling new earthquakes, it's not easy for them. I mean, it's everyday life. They are just starting to do something and then they stop. They start to think differently and they stop again. It's really not very easy to function in that circumstances. There is not only one earthquake and it's gone, because we had more than 1,000. I mean, they had more than 1,000 earthquakes, and it's still the ground is still shaking every day. So I'm just counting that we are here. We have that platform. We have Juraj here. He said he's very satisfied with us. We made a report. There was one chemist who works in the Pliva institution. It's a factory of what? She's analytics. she made that analytical study of that project in the last year. And so we have a really good, I don't know, I can show you some of them, like in this, like in this forms. There were about 20 different questions. And so this would be, for this year, this would be like leading material for us. We are here. If anybody in Zagreb, now maybe some people are listening who would be important. So we are here. If you have any idea, just ask. We shall open new places in volunteer project. Just let us know, what do you need? We shall organize that. But we can't do anything without you. I mean, without institutions, without the Ministry of Culture. They have to give permission for those things, because you can't work with the heritage without permissions of institutions. So I just have to say we are here. We are here to volunteer if you need us.
Thank you so much, because this is also, this conference is very important because of that, to make connection and to see, like, to solve some, to get some solutions. So I hope, I don't know, like, if Juraj, Bert or Svjetlana, do you have some idea, or maybe because we are all connected, we can exchange some emails later, or make some new Zoom after later, or something like that.
Maybe Bert can save us with an idea. It's very well established.
Yeah, I think we are running out of time, but you can, yes, we can finish, like, Bert, you can add if you have something.
Maybe that I'm not the best person to make the final words, because I'm coming from outside, and it's not so easy as it looks. But what I could say from our side, the offer to cooperate is every time there. Usually a project needs indeed a longer time preparation, because also we cannot work beside the official institutions. But if there is the need, we could even still think about a project this year to be implemented. But means, yeah, feel open to contact us, and sometimes also we might arrange contacts with others to bring two stakeholders together. But yeah, we are also only an NGO and also not so big. That means, yeah. But anyway, I know also that's one interesting aspect, that bringing people from abroad to a particular place creates or may create a certain dynamics, because it mirrors the value of the particular heritage towards the local administration, towards the local population. So in this regard, it might be also helpful to involve international volunteers.
Thank you. And we have in quick question and answer, we have I have the impression that in many stories delivered by our panelist volunteers act quicker and more creatively than official state or municipal organization. What is the cause of such scenarios? Does anyone want to, maybe Juraj, maybe you can.
Yes, of course. I could give a part of the answer, because the answer is definitely complex. I think the main reason is that informal civic initiatives don't have the bureaucratic and administrative challenges that both nonprofit organizations and especially municipal and state authorities have. And although that might seem good because they are fast and they are effective, it is also not always the best channel for involving volunteers and providing help, because there is a reason that the legal framework exists. It is here to protect both volunteers, but also the people who need help of volunteers. And the law defines this and implements it in a good way. It also helps us, well, evident volunteers to collect their hours and their work that they do, and gives a great way of evaluation. So I think it is important that we find a balance, that we see which are these bureaucratic and administrative challenges, and try to well, find a way to make them easier, especially in times of crisis. I think that is the feedback that we have to draw from this.
Thank you so much. Does anyone wants to also, Svjetlana, maybe you?
Yes, I just wanted to add one component where volunteers maybe could find their role and not break any legal framework or authority obstacles or bureaucratic obstacles in getting permission, is promoting and making actually awareness and outreach to younger generation on importance of heritage. What was noticed, I mean, in the countries where I worked, of course, they were either affected by conflict or politically destabilized, and heritage is constantly under some kind of a threat. Very often youth is unaware of the importance and unaware of valuing the tradition and valuing the monuments or facades. I mean, my heart is bleeding when I hear that the facades are being falling down and they were not collected. In Beirut, my UNIFIL peacekeepers were collecting every piece of a facade and putting it on the side to be saved and to be photographed and to be documented for any future restoration and reconstruction. So maybe here volunteers can do more awareness and more outreach, and that would maybe motivate local authorities, ministries or experts, or universities, students, to be more proactive in this work that maybe doesn't require that much of funding and that much of, and again, all this can be done online using a social media, and it's one step forward in promotion of importance of a heritage, because this is almost forgotten, you know. I don't know what is curriculum nowadays, but less and less we are listening or having students knowing or children knowing about art, about values, about this painting or this monument or this particular period or this pillar being done, is it Doric or which century it's coming from. So that's the way where maybe volunteers would get a higher profile.
Yeah, that is true. Like we must do education all the time,
always in all aspects. Always. And these are things maybe easier to do than getting very concrete and dirty work done.